Well, hello, fellow railroaders and friends. Welcome back to the Lower Alabama Railroad. Today, thought we'd go over uh, how I power the railroad. Understand that this is the way I did it. It's not necessarily the way you have to do it, not necessarily the best way to do it, but it's how I did it. Uh, Overall, on the railroad, I have two lines that are interconnected. So I have power running independently to each line. And then I also have a independent power source for all of the switches, so they are always under power. And then I have another power source for accessories and lighting. Now let's get into the nitty gritty on this thing. Power to my railroad from the beginning has come from this 275 watt classic L.A.R.R ZW transformer. It has 4 power outputs. Handle A powers my outer loop. Handle B is my powers my switches, gives them a constant, I think I have it at 14 volts. Handle C takes care of the lights and accessories. And then handle D, excuse me, takes care of my inner loop. Now, you notice another little transformer here. This is a DC transformer that powers the turntable, and then another little transformer. This provides power to the operating billboard. Now, the ZW, if you'll notice here, is I guess it was still made by Lionel, but it was a part additional accessory that shows you the power and the amperage for each output. Hold on one second while I turn power on. Down here I have a power strip that everything plugs into. And right here you'll see that on B, which is my switches, that's got bumped up to 15 volts. Let's take that back down a little bit. Okay, there we go. We're hanging between 14 and 15. There, that's better. And right now, this is my lighting and accessory circuits, and obviously power to the 2 tracks is gone. And the ZW worked great in the beginning when I was running all conventional stuff. But as I started adding command control stuff, the circuit breaker on the ZW wasn't fast enough in case of a short to keep from damaging the electronics in the newer engines. So, and here I break out my fancy pointer stick, I have added, these are made by Lionel, they're lock-on devices. One for the inner, one for the outer loop. And they have a much faster acting circuit breaker, so in case of problems, it cuts power immediately and doesn't do any damage to the circuitry. Now, from the 2 lock-ons, you can see right there where the wire's going under the table. That goes down to bus boards underneath the table. And then from the bus boards, I run individual power to each one of the switches or to the lights or whatnot. And on the tracks, I run about every 6 feet of track, I have a jumper that comes back to the circuit board. Again, only one way of doing it, not necessarily the best way, but the way that I chose to do it. Now this worked really well for me. And I could run on my D handle on my inner loop. I run back to a L.A.R.R power brick. And by flipping this switch to either command or conventional, I could take my older engines with that in the conventional mode, and I could still operate them using my cab 1L remote. That's this one right here. Or if I put it back into the command, then I could operate normally with the cab 1L or with the Lion Chief Universal remote. And this all worked really good up until a few weeks ago. I started trying to run these two engines. These are the two oldest in my collection. The one on the front here is a Marx 464. That's probably 60, 65 years old. This was actually not the one, but the same model that I got when I was 5 years old, my first train. This other model is also a Marx, and it belonged to my cousin, so I'm figuring it's probably 50, 55 years old. And the trouble that I was having when I tried to run these things, they'd go forward, then go backwards, going forwards and backwards. I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the heck is going on, when I happened to notice that on these houses right here, when power is applied to the track, you get a green light. And if the circuit breaker pops, it goes red. Well, I just happened to glance down while one of the engines was going nuts, and I saw the light flash red. So I said, maybe what I have here is a case of the circuit breaker momentarily tripping out, and of course then when the power is re-established, it goes in reverse. So I did a little test. I set up a simple loop of track in on the kitchen table, and I took another transformer that I had, put them on there, and the trains ran fine. So I kind of confirmed what was going on, and that brought me to my latest modifications to the railroad, which I finished last night. And that is, I now have a dual power source. I added a little auxiliary bench here on the control panel and put my KW, another classic Lionel transformer. And if you'll notice right here, I've got two switches. These are dual pole, dual throw switches. And like right here, this is for my outer loop. In this position, kicked over, it's drawing power from this lever on here. In the center, power is off. And in this position, power reverts to my A handle on the ZW. Likewise, top side here is my inner loop with the switch thrown over this way. Power is provided here. Center, power off, thrown over, power here. So what this lets me do is, in the cases where I want to run the conventional engines, I can just throw both of these switches and I can run conventional on both tracks. I can alternate and have one track powered from this one track powered from that, so I can run conventional and command control at the same time. Now, if you'll notice here on my control table, you see a hole here and here. That's where the wires for the Lionel sound button went on. I don't really need that for the command stuff, so I moved that over and attached it here. Again, this is connected to the outer loop and here to the inner loop. And it actually ends up working pretty darn good, although I will be the first one to admit that yesterday it had me pulling my hair out because I could not, everything worked good, when I was just using one track or the other, but when I tried to run them both, things got stupid. And I rechecked all the wiring again, and the ZW worked fine from, just like it was normal. Either I could run both tracks, no problem. Well, I finally got so aggravated, I just quit. Came back a couple hours later. I thought of a couple things at supper, and I checked those, and they weren't right. So it had to be the wiring to the transformer. And this turned out it was pure T operator error. On the ZW, the upper post are the hot post, the lower post are the neutrals. I assumed, and we all know what assume means, that the KW was the same. Oh no, on the KW, the bottom post are the hot and the upper post are the commons. And they are marked, but when you assume, you don't look at stuff like that. Once I flipped the wires to the proper post, everything worked great. And I'm happy now with this. It gives me a lot more flexibility, and it gets this KW upwards being used and not just sitting in a box underneath the underneath the table. So this was a kind of an interesting project. And again, I can run both both tracks off the KW, but I still keep the ZW on for powering my switches and my lights and accessories. So it gives me a lot more flexibility. And again, is this the only way this could have been done? Probably not. Is this the best way it could have been done? I don't know, but it's the way I chose to do it. And it's working. I'm happy, and that's what counts. After all, as they say, my railroad, my rules. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to check this out. If you have any questions, comments, please mark them down. I like to hear it. And if you would, consider subscribing to the channel. I'd appreciate that as well. And until the next video, goodbye from the Lower Alabama Railroad.